Have you ever held on to a memory so tightly, like so desperately, that it started to feel almost, I don't know, more real than the present moment you were actually living in?
Oh, absolutely. I think we all do that to some extent.
Right. Like, think about that for a second. You know that feeling where the past isn't just something that happened to you, but it becomes this physical place you retreat to.
Yeah, space you actively curate.
Exactly.
Hmm.
A place you curate and protect. Until one day you wake up and realize you've been spending more time with ghosts than with, the living people right in front of you.
We all build these internal museums. It's human nature. We
Yeah.
appoint ourselves the sole curators, deciding what gets displayed under the warm spotlights and what gets shoved into the dark basement of our subconscious. But the danger of a museum, though, is that, well, nothing inside it grows.
Because it's dead.
Right, it is static by design.
And that static museum of the mind is really the heartbeat of today's deep dive. We are exploring a truly mesmerizing novel by Nirasha Gunasekera called Shadows in the Frame.
Such a brilliant layered text.
It really is. It takes that universal feeling of nostalgia and like weaponizes it. It turns it into this psychological thriller of the soul.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it.
At its center is a character named Edmund. He's an aging, former literature teacher whose entire existence has become paralyzed by his obsession with a former student named Clara.
But it's crucial to know that he isn't just daydreaming about his memories of her.
No, not at all. He is entirely consumed by an enigmatic oil portrait of her, this painting that just hangs in his cramped, dusty study.
Right. And to really understand Edmund's paralysis, we have to look at the world happening outside his study window.
The setting is everything here.
Exactly. Gunasekera places this narrative in Melbourne, Australia, right in the mid-1990s. And this is not just a backdrop. It is a crucial mechanism of the story.
Yeah, Melbourne at this time was a city undergoing an intense, almost violent period of political and physical transformation.
You had the Kennett government reforms sweeping through the state of Victoria.
Which, just to give context without taking sides on the politics of it, the text uses these reforms to highlight aggressive structural change.
Right. The book focuses on how these policies of deregulation and privatization were completely altering the socio-economic fabric of the city.
Yeah.
Working-class enclaves like Fitzroy and Collingwood were facing rapid, unapologetic gentrification.
You can practically, smell the construction dust reading this book.
Oh, for sure.
Old brick warehouses, places with generations of history are just being demolished overnight to make way for sleek, anonymous glass towers.
And pushing back against that corporate polish is this vibrant, desperate counterculture exploding in the alleyways.
The grunge scene.
Exactly. We see the rise of underground clubs, the birth of the street art scene in places like Hosier Lane. It's a real grunge aesthetic that is fighting for its life against the incoming tide of privatization.
It is a city that is literally shedding its skin. And the friction between the old skin and the new skin is palpable on every single page. The genius of the setting is how it acts as a mirror for Edmund's own internal crisis.
The city is trying to pave over its messy history, and Edmund is trying to do the exact same thing in his mind.
Exactly. So our mission today is to crack this book open. We're not just giving you a plot summary, but looking at the wiring underneath the floorboards.
I love that. We're going to examine the power dynamics of play, look at how memory and history are manipulated, and ultimately question the very nature of reality within the text.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the best place to start dismantling those power dynamics is the very first page.
The opening is so striking. The way Edmund views Clara from the outset establishes the entire foundation of their relationship, or rather, his idea of their relationship.
Right, because it's not a real relationship.
No, it's a projection. We are introduced to Edmund standing safely inside his darkened home, looking out through a window. Outside, Clara is standing in a torrential rainstorm.
The contrast there is immediately striking. He is warm, dry, and hidden, and she is totally exposed to the elements.
The text describes the storm with words like unrelenting force and swirling madness. It is chaotic and wild.
But he's not in the chaos.
Right. Edmund isn't out there sharing that experience. The narrative explicitly refers to him as a watcher in the shadows.
He's just observing her from a place of complete detachment.
And the language he uses to describe her in this moment is incredibly telling. He admires how she moves through the world as though the earth beneath her feet were simply a canvas on which she painted her presence.
A canvas. Let's really pause on that word.
Yeah, it's a loaded term.
Because on a surface level, you could read that line and think it sounds poetic, romantic even.
It sounds beautiful until you look closer.
Exactly. When you really think about it, calling a woman a canvas is incredibly reductive.
It is an act of reduction. When we look at this through a feminist lens, specifically analyzing the mechanics of the male gaze, we see how dangerous that metaphor actually is.
Because a canvas is blank.
It's flat. It only exists to receive the projections of an artist.
Wow, yeah.
By reducing the chaotic, rain-soaked reality of the world to a canvas, Edmund is reducing Clara to a mere image. He is stripping away her agency, her inner turmoil, her messy humanity.
He constructs her as this voiceless muse, this pure ideal. In his mind, he is the artist, and she is merely the material he works with.
He traps her in his own narrative.
And the novel even makes these subtle nods to Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray, right? But it flips the script.
Oh, completely.
Instead of the painting aging while the person stays young, Edmund uses the painting of Clara to freeze her in time. He equates her youth and physical beauty with absolute uncorrupted virtue.
He denies her the right to age.
Yeah, the right to make mistakes, to be a complex, flawed human being. To Edmund, Clara isn't a person at all. She is an aesthetic experience.
An aesthetic experience requires total control. He watches her in the rain, and the text details how, when she happens to look up and catch his eye, maybe offering the faintest curve of a smile, he retreats into his study and spends years agonizing over what it meant.
Years over one look.
Exactly. Was it an invitation? Was it a dismissal? A passing gesture of politeness? He constructs an entire universe of meaning around a single ambiguous facial expression.
And notice what is missing from that process. Her actual input.
Yes.
He assumes total authorship over her internal life because he never actually asks her what she meant.
I am so glad you brought that up because I have to push back on the romance of this entire premise.
Please do.
People might read the jacket copy and think, oh, what a tragic, devoted love story. He has loved her from afar all these years.
Yeah, the classic unrequited love trope.
But we have to ask, does Edmund actually love Clara? Or does he just love the power of observing her without the risk of real interaction?
Oh, that's the core of it. It's like he's pinned a beautiful butterfly to a corkboard and called it a relationship.
The pinned butterfly is a really potent analogy. It highlights the violence inherent in his observation.
Because he loves the control he has over his idea of her. If he actually walked out into the rain and engaged with her, she might say something he disagrees with.
She might have a terrible laugh.
Right. Or a political opinion he hates. She might ruin the perfect silent painting he has created in his mind.
The tragedy here is that Edmund views his silent observation as a form of noble restraint.
Oh, he thinks he's being so chivalrous.
He really does. He tells himself that keeping his distance is respectful, but really it is utter cowardice. It is entirely self-serving.
Yeah, he gets to experience the intoxicating rush of romantic longing without ever having to face the terrifying, messy vulnerability of an actual relationship.
He is hoarding her image. But Gunasekera doesn't let him get away with it. The narrative builds to a moment where that glass case is just totally shattered.
The confrontation scene.
Yes. There is a pivotal scene about a third of the way through the book where Clara unexpectedly arrives at Edmund's cramped cottage.
And she doesn't arrive as the ethereal, silent muse of his fantasies.
Not at all. She arrives as a living woman, and most importantly, she arrives with a voice.
Oh, this scene is electric. Like he is sitting there, obsessing over one of his books, spiraling in his usual nostalgic loops, and suddenly the door opens.
She walks right into his sanctuary.
And she doesn't just speak, she completely dismantles his entire worldview. She looks at him and says, "You just leave people tangled up in your web of unfinished thoughts."
Such a devastating line.
She diagnoses his condition right there on the rug. She tells him that his obsession isn't even about her, and it never was. It's about himself, his fear of aging, his inability to let go of the past.
We can view this confrontation as a profound moment of post-structural feminist reclamation.
Okay, let's translate that for a second. When we talk about post-structural in this context, what are we really talking about on a human level?
Right, good point. It means breaking down the rigid categories or structures we use to define reality, especially those that create a hierarchy. Edmund has built a binary structure. He is the active observer, the subject, and Clara is the passive observed, the object.
So he holds the power because he holds the gaze.
Exactly. But when Clara enters and speaks, she disrupts that binary. She refuses to play the role of the passive object.
She breaks the frame.
Yes. By diagnosing him, by telling him what his motivations are, she flips the gaze back onto him. She reclaims her voice and exposes the selfishness of his so-called noble distance.
She tells him, you've been living in a version of me that doesn't exist anymore.
And the way he reacts is so pathetic, honestly.
It really is. He flinches at the word obsession.
He immediately tries to explain himself, trying to regain control of the narrative, using his flowery academic language.
But she cuts him off. She strips him of his power simply by naming what he's doing.
And right as she leaves, she drops that absolute gut punch of a line, "You're not the only one living with ghosts, Edmund. We all have them. But it's up to us whether we let them define us." It leaves him devastated because his entire way of existing in the world was built on a foundation of her silence.
Once she speaks, the foundation crumbles.
His fantasy cannot survive contact with reality. But, the novel pushes this exploration of power and visibility even further. It introduces a counterpoint to Clara in the character of Margaret.
Oh, Margaret. She is the total antithesis of the silent muse.
Completely.
If Clara represents the idealized, distant memory, Margaret is the undeniable, imposing present. She moves into Edmund's orbit, and she exudes this raw, visceral, commanding presence.
She isn't a ghost he can project onto.
No, she is flesh and blood, and she refuses to let him ignore her.
Margaret weaponizes her visibility. While Edmund tried to sanitize Clara and abstract her into an ideal of purity, Margaret asserts her physical and emotional presence aggressively.
She takes up space.
She has, as the text notes, witnessed the world's contradictions firsthand. She is a woman who has lived a complex life, and she demands to be seen in her entirety.
And the most striking example of this forced engagement is her pregnancy.
Yes, absolutely.
She drops this bombshell on him. "I'm pregnant, Edmund." And the circumstances around it are completely unresolved.
We don't get the tidy backstory.
Right. The father is never named. It is messy, it is biologically undeniable, and it demands a reaction. He can't just stare at it from afar.
That demand for reaction is the critical shift. Margaret is forcing Edmund to engage with a messy, living reality rather than a sanitized intellectual fantasy.
By presenting her pregnant body to him, she's basically forcing him to acknowledge the continuation of life.
A pregnancy represents the ultimate uncontrollable nature of the future. It is biology in motion. It pulls him out of his intellectualized grief and forces him to look at the material world.
She tells him directly, "I need you to see us as we are right now."
And Edmund's entire coping mechanism has always been observation without participation.
He wants to freeze things in time. He literally wants life to be a portrait he can hang on the wall.
But Margaret's pregnancy is a ticking clock. It proves that time is moving forward, bodies are changing, and life is happening whether he participates or not.
So controlling an image, like Edmund does with Clara, is fundamentally about controlling time.
Yes, he is terrified of the forward march of time.
Which brings us to the underlying mechanics of how he manages his environment. Let's shift our lens a bit to look at how this novel treats the concept of preserving the past.
The archival themes are so strong here.
They really are. Let's step into Edmund's study for a second, because the physical space he inhabits is so revealing.
It's his sanctuary.
Right, his cramped room in Carlton. It's described as a space overflowing with dog-eared books, journals, sepia-toned photographs, and that titular portrait of Clara just dominating the space.
It is a room where the air itself feels heavy, where time feels completely suspended.
The novel beautifully terms him an archivist of longing.
If we analyze his study as an archive, we start to uncover its inherent flaws. The fundamental question of any archive, whether it's a national museum or a personal diary, is, well, what is being preserved and what is being deliberately excluded?
Who has the power to decide what makes it into the box?
Exactly.
Think about your own phone's camera roll for a second. You go on a trip, you take 100 photos, you keep the 5 flattering ones where the lighting is perfect, and you delete the ones where you look tired or the background is messy.
You curate it.
Right. You are curating an archive of your life to present a specific, polished narrative. That is exactly what Edmund is doing, but on a pathological level.
He is a deeply biased curator. To preserve his specific brand of nostalgia, he has to edit out vast swaths of reality.
And most notably, he erases Clara's autonomy.
He cannot allow his archive to reflect the fact that Clara grew up, got engaged to someone else, and moved on with her life.
His archive requires her erasure as a functioning, independent adult. He isn't archiving history, he's archiving his own desire.
He curates the narrative to protect his own fragility. And this is where Gunasekera's use of the Melbourne setting becomes absolutely brilliant.
Oh, the parallels are incredible.
She mirrors Edmund's internal psychological archiving with the external environment of the city. The city of Melbourne is functioning as an erased archive right outside his window.
The text repeatedly draws our attention to the physical destruction happening in the mid-90s.
The demolition of the old brick warehouses, the loss of working-class pubs. The narrative talks about the ruthless pace of socio-economic reform.
So the gentrification of the city is the exact same mechanism as Edmund's memory curation.
It's macro versus micro.
Exactly. What is the government doing? They are paving over the messy, complex, sometimes painful reality of the city's working-class history to present a sleek, highly curated, sanitized version of a modern metropolis.
They want to erase the grit.
And Edmund wants to erase the reality of loss to present a tragic, romantic narrative of unrequited love. Both the government and Edmund are committing acts of violent erasure just to make themselves more comfortable.
That's a profound connection. The text explicitly notes how the newly built spaces don't feel like home, and how the people who have lived in those neighborhoods for decades have suddenly become invisible.
Yeah, they're just wiped from the record.
This aligns perfectly with archival feminism. It's a framework that critiques how traditional institutional archives, which are often controlled by patriarchal or capitalist power structures, systematically erase the lived experiences of marginalized people, the working class, and women.
Because the official record only tells the story of the powerful.
Exactly.
So Edmund's journals, his books, his oil painting, these all represent the traditional, static, male-owned archive.
It's paper and paint, locked in a room, immune to the weather.
But the novel contrasts these dead archives with something far more dynamic. Let's talk about Margaret's tattoo.
Yes. This is where the archival lens gets really fascinating. Margaret has this cryptic spiral tattoo inked onto her ribcage.
And it isn't just a decorative piece.
No, she reveals it is an ancestral legacy, a covenant passed down through the generations of women in her family.
When she shows it to him, it completely disrupts his worldview.
Because it introduces the concept of the embodied archive. Traditional archiving relies on freezing time. But Margaret's tattoo represents a living, breathing history.
It is a record inscribed on the female body, passed down through blood and skin.
It suggests that true history isn't something you can frame and hang on a wall to look at safely. It is a living entity that changes, grows, and demands a debt to its origin.
It's chaotic. An embodied archive cannot be controlled by Edmund's gaze. First of all, the tattoo is hidden on her ribcage. It is only revealed on her terms when he chooses to show it.
She controls the access to the archive.
Right. It shatters his need for neat, observable categories. History isn't a painting. It's a spiral etched into the flesh of a pregnant woman who is actively creating the future.
Margaret's living archive challenges the very stability of Edmund's paper archives. If the past is not a fixed, objective truth, but a living, mutating spiral carried in the bodies of the living, then the foundation of Edmund's reality is deeply unstable.
He cannot trust his own memories.
No, he can't.
Which is terrifying. If the past is a living thing that changes, what does that mean for his grip on reality?
It starts to slip.
This realization pushes the book from a slow-burn psychological drama into something deeply unsettling. Edmund's mind begins to crack under the weight of this instability.
Which forces us to look at the novel through an existential lens. What does it actually mean to exist in this story?
Okay, let's go there.
Ontology is the philosophical study of being, of what it means to exist. And as the novel progresses, we see the complete fragmentation of Edmund's being.
He is ontologically unstable.
He exists in a state of non-being because he point-blank refuses to participate in the present moment.
The text literally describes him as a shadow. It says he feels like a watcher at the edge of life, always present, always waiting.
He is haunting his own life.
He really is.
This fragmentation is highlighted by the intense contrast between his inner self and the external world. His study is quiet, dusty, and static. The external world of Melbourne is chaotic, loud, and constantly moving.
Consider the scene with the Oasis concert.
Oh, the concert scene is phenomenal.
You have tens of thousands of youth surging forward, the music vibrating through the concrete, a symphony of liberation and chaos. It's loud, it's sweaty, it's alive.
And where is Edmund?
He is miles away, sitting in the dark, completely disconnected from the frequency of the modern world.
The sheer volume and vitality of the concert only emphasize his ghostly state. He cannot bridge the gap between his internal, silent archive and the screaming reality of the external world.
And because he refuses to bridge that gap, the architecture of his reality begins to warp.
We start seeing these strange encounters with secondary characters that feel entirely surreal.
Let's talk about Violet, the bookstore owner.
Yes, this part is so strange.
Edmund walks by her shop, and without him saying a word, she seemingly reads his mind. She walks out and hands him a rare, leather-bound book about a vanished woman in a portrait.
And the story in the book exactly mirrors his internal obsession with Clara.
Right. How did she know?
Then there is the sudden, almost aggressive appearance of the mysterious Rebecca.
She shows up, uninvited, in his apartment, speaking in these cryptic, seductive riddles about truth and the labyrinth of his mind.
She tells him, "I am the one who sees what you cannot. I see the Clara that you chase, the phantom of your lost desire."
This is where I started thinking aloud while reading, like, are we sure characters like Rebecca, or even Violet's perfectly timed book recommendation, are literally happening in the physical world of the novel?
It's highly questionable.
Or is the narrative suggesting that reality is entirely subjective, and we are actually watching Edmund's psychological architecture collapse in real time?
The environment reflects his mental state.
Even the portrait of Clara begins to act strangely. He talks about the light in the room shifting and the canvas seemingly warping around the painted face. Is there a magical realism element here, or is his mind breaking?
The brilliance of the text is that it refuses to definitively answer that question. That ambiguity is central to the existential philosophy of the book.
It doesn't hold your hand.
Not at all. The novel suggests that reality is not a fixed objective construct that we all agree upon. It is, as Clara says during her confrontation, a web we weave.
So if reality is a web we weave, Edmund has woven himself a trap.
Exactly the predicament of the existential antihero.
Let's break that down.
Existentialism, at its core, posits that we are thrust into a universe without inherent meaning, and we must create our own essence, our own reality, through action and choice.
But Edmund has spent decades avoiding choice.
He has avoided action. He is hidden in the shadows of observation. But the universe is no longer allowing him to hide.
It's coming for him.
Through Margaret's undeniable pregnancy, the physical shifting of the city outside, and his own unraveling subconscious manifested in characters like Rebecca, the universe is forcing him to face the terrifying freedom of existence.
The terror of freedom, that's a very Sartre concept, isn't it? The idea that we are condemned to be free.
Yes, exactly.
Edmund is realizing that to exist in the present, he has to make choices, and making choices means accepting impermanence.
He has to accept that Clara is gone.
He has to accept that the old Melbourne he loved is gone. Most terrifyingly, he has to accept that he's aging. To truly live is to accept that things change and die.
To step into the light means accepting the deep vulnerability of the present moment. It means abandoning the safety of his curated archive and engaging with the chaotic, embodied reality that Margaret represents.
He has to embrace a post-humanist understanding of the world.
Let's define that for the listener. When we bring post-humanism into this, how does that apply to Edmund's fear of time?
In this context, it relates to the idea that human beings are not these separate, autonomous masters of the universe who can stand outside of nature and observe it from a safe distance.
Which is exactly what Edmund tries to do.
Right. Posthumanism suggests that we are deeply entangled with our environments, our objects, our bodies, and the flow of time. We are part of the flux.
We cannot control the decay of the city or the biology of a pregnancy or the fading of a memory.
We are subject to material reality. Nothing is static, and trying to make it static is a form of madness.
It is incredibly deep philosophical territory.
And you would think after putting us through this intense psychological wringer, the author would give us a clear, cathartic resolution.
But she doesn't.
No. The actual ending of the book leaves a lot of these existential questions frustratingly, or depending on how you look at it, brilliantly unanswered.
It sparks a massive debate.
Which brings us to our final segment, open interpretation. Because you and I walked away from the climax of this novel with two very different reads on what actually happened.
We really did. So the climax of the novel forces Edmund to make a definitive choice. He stands at the door of his study.
The threshold.
The ghost of Clara, the pull of the portrait, and the comfort of his memories are pulling him backward into the room. But he ultimately chooses to turn his back on the painting.
He walks out.
He walks out, takes Margaret's hand, and they step forward together into the literal dawn of a new Melbourne. I read this as a genuine, hard-won existential triumph.
A triumph. I just don't see it.
Hear me out. From a philosophical standpoint, it is the ultimate breakthrough. Edmund finally accepts the material reality of the present.
But does he?
He abandons the static, idealized, two-dimensional image of the past, the portrait, and chooses to engage with the living, breathing, profoundly imperfect reality of Margaret and her unborn child.
Okay, I see where you're coming from.
He accepts the flux of the city. He stops being an archivist of longing and finally becomes a participant in his own existence.
The text explicitly states that in that moment, he understands that to truly live was to embrace both the beauty of what was lost and the promise of what lay ahead.
Yes, it is a moment of profound, integrated acceptance.
Okay, I hear the existential optimism there, but I have to push back hard on this.
Go for it.
I am much more cynical about this ending. Yes, he takes Margaret's hand. Yes, he steps into the dawn. That is what happens literally. But look at why he is drawn to Margaret in those final chapters.
You're talking about the tattoo.
Yes. He doesn't just suddenly fall in love with her messy reality. He becomes intensely, almost feverishly obsessed with the mystery of her ancestral spiral tattoo.
You're suggesting his underlying pathology hasn't changed.
I am suggesting he hasn't fundamentally changed at all.
That's a bold claim.
The text says the tattoo became an enigma in his mind, and he spends nights lying awake trying to decipher its geometric patterns. He just swapped his obsessions.
From the painting to the tattoo.
He went from obsessing over the mystery of Clara's painted portrait to obsessing over the mystery of Margaret's inked tattoo. He went from a canvas enigma to a flesh enigma. Did he really choose the messy present, or did he just find a brand new puzzle to focus on so he doesn't have to deal with his own emptiness?
To avoid looking at himself.
Exactly. He needs to be solving a mystery, decoding a symbol to avoid looking at himself. I don't think he chose reality. I think he just found a shinier, newer artifact for his archive.
That is a highly cynical read, but I have to acknowledge it is heavily supported by the text's deliberate ambiguity.
It's all right there.
The unresolved elements of the ending are glaring. The nature of Margaret's pregnancy, the fact that the father remains a total mystery to both Edmund and the reader, and the exact literal meaning of that spiral legacy are left intentionally vague.
Gunasekera refuses to translate the tattoo for us.
It is maddening as a reader. What does the spiral actually mean? Is it trauma? Is it strength? Is it just a shape?
It means whatever the chaotic future holds.
Right. Modern literature often resists clean, cathartic, bow-tied conclusions because life resists them.
Real life doesn't wrap up neatly.
The unresolved pregnancy and the cryptic tattoo serve as symbols of the unpredictable, uncontrollable nature of the future. They're the exact opposite of the fixed, supposedly knowable past that Edmund used to cling to.
So even if he's obsessed with something moving.
Exactly. By embracing Margaret with all her unresolved mysteries, her hidden history, and her impending motherhood, Edmund is, at the very least, embracing the unknown.
He is accepting that he cannot control the narrative anymore.
Whether he's doing it healthily or merely shifting his obsessive tendencies, as you suggest, the undeniable result is that he is finally stepping into the rushing current of time rather than standing on the bank watching it flow by.
He is at least in the river now, I'll give you that, even if he's still desperately looking for a life raft to cling to.
And that ambiguity is what makes the book stick with you long after you close it.
It forces the reader to confront their own tendencies.
Exactly.
So let's bring this back to you, listening right now. We aren't all retired literature teachers obsessing over oil paintings and dusty studies, but we all curate our own portraits of the people we've lost, or the relationships that failed, or even past versions of ourselves that we miss.
We all have that internal museum we talked about at the start.
Think about the memories you polish and display in your mind, and the messy, painful realities you shove into the basement. What are you archiving?
And more importantly, is your archive keeping you safe, or is it keeping you from living?
Are you holding on to a ghost because the living, breathing people around you are too unpredictable?
It is the vital question the novel poses. What Gunasekera leaves us with is the profound, somewhat melancholic realization that every human heart is a repository of contradictory passions.
Beautifully said.
We are all a complex blend of the luminous hues of memory and the deep, often terrifying shadows of desire. We're all constantly navigating the liminal space between the ghosts we cherish and the chaotic reality that demands our participation.
The novel doesn't condemn Edmund for his longing.
No, it pities his paralysis. It serves as a beautiful, haunting reminder that memory is a wonderful place to visit, but a deeply toxic place to live.
That is the perfect distillation of the book's emotional core. And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over on your own.
Ooh, I love these.
We talk a lot today about Edmund archiving his memories and the city of Melbourne erasing its own history, but the novel implies that the city itself is as much a living, breathing character as Edmund or
It
Clara.
really is.
If that is true, what if the spaces we inhabit are actively archiving us? Think about your own home, the apartment you rent, the streets you walk down every day on your commute. What if the walls of your city are absorbing your grief, your joy, your secret obsessions, just waiting for the next generation to uncover those hidden marks?
We leave traces everywhere.
We spend so much time thinking we are the curators of our lives, but maybe in the grand sweep of time, we are just the temporary exhibits in the city's long memory.
The city remembers what the mind tries so desperately to forget.
It always does. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the beautiful, unsettling world of shadows in the frame. Until next time, take a good look at the walls around you and don't be afraid to question the shadows in your own frames.